Hi guys, how are you? I hope you're alright. For those who don't know me, my name is Clara and I'm the owner of this channel. This is the Ink Path, where I talk about books in English and Spanish. And obviously you're in an English video, but I normally, what I do is to create different playlists in both languages. So you choose what book or what video do you want to watch and in which language. If you want to stay, we're going to talk about my favorite national, that is Spanish book that I read this year, and I really want to talk a lot about it because the authors are brilliant. And well, if you like this video, you can give it a like, or you can subscribe if you want to see more content. You can also follow me on the social media platforms that I use. Everything is down below, and if you subscribe, don't forget to click the little bell so YouTube notifies you when I'm uploading a video. Having said that, we are going to talk about this book that I have here, which is, let me just take it from the table. This is La Segunda Revolución, Heredero. This book is a masterpiece, and I'll tell you now why. Bear with me. In this book, written by Costa Alcalá, or which is the same, Georgia Costa and Fernando Alcalá, two authors that publish under this pen name, which is basically their surnames. In this book, they present us a new world which has its capital in the city of Bled. Bled is, as I said, the capital of a new territory. And in this place, in this city, we do have a kind of university called El Liceo, and all the people that go to this place, they go there to actually become guards of the city. And to be able to do that, you have to study several subjects and learn how to control not only your element but other families' element. You will probably tell me, what do you mean by element and what do you mean by families? In this world, there's a kind of array of abilities regarding controlling certain elements like earth, fire, air, but also other kind of powers that relate to controlling electricity, or one thing that I really love, that is illusion, when you can control the light and the colors of something and you can create this kind of optic illusions out of it. So the world is kind of divided in families. The families can be blood families, but also what you normally know as the families are the people who share the control over one of these elements, one ability to control one of these elements. However, if you want to be part of the guard of the city, the guard of Bled, you have to study all of these subjects and control not only your element but other people's element, because the theory is that even if the link is very kind of weak, you can actually empathize with the majority of these kind of abilities, of these kind of elements, and control them even in a very small amount if possible. So at the beginning of this story, we discovered a set or a cast of characters that actually are starting in this institution, kind of academy, or they are in the second and third year of studies. The thing is that when the book starts and you get used to this cast of characters and the rhythm of the classes, there's one professor that appears dead on campus, and nobody knows who did it, because this goes beyond kind of a vengeance or something like that, because 17 years ago there was a revolution. That's why it's called La Segunda Revolución. There was a revolution, and this revolution resulted in the end of a kind of monarchy sort of that was controlling the whole country, and they establish a republic instead. But what you don't know at the beginning of the story is that the majority of the conflicts that ended in that revolution, or the conflict that happened during the revolution, they are not healed because they are still very fresh, and there's a lot of political intrigue that is not resolved. So you are going to be involved in this kind of murder, but also in this political scheme, and all of this is happening while a cast of very young characters have to navigate through an academic field that they don't control. First thing first, if we are going to talk about a fantasy book with a whole new world, with a lot of characters, and with a lot of new places with different traditions, we have to talk about the world building, which is one of the kind of biggest features in this story, mainly because we are in the beginning of a trilogy and you have to set the kind of rules for this world. What I love the most about this is that it's very detailed, because you have a manic amount of characters, a very, very young characters, which are studying in the same building, but not all of them belong to the same kind of part of the country, or the same family, or the same social status. So everything is different from what they already know in the capital. And I love how this background is developed, because it's either told by a character kind of defending himself or herself when other people are making assumption about the cities that they live, or the island that they live in originally, or it is the kind of more historical events are told in kind of flashbacks or textbooks, which is a very recurrent idea here because we are in an academical field. But I love this because it's not info dumping. The information is provided when it's needed, or when it's important to what the character is saying or the plot is going. So I love this because you have bits and pieces about the different areas and the different costumes, and not costumes, traditions in every part of the country. I also love how, although the link to the abilities that they have, the elements that they control, the families in the end, is a very fantastical approach to it. When they explain it, it has some kind of link to the place they actually live. For example, there's a character who control illusions, because mainly from the place he is, everyone belongs to that kind of family. So he knows that in his island, all the actors and show business people belong to, because illusion is very linked to the arts. So it's very funny to see that kind of coincidence. And for example, there's another character who lives near the mountains in a very, very cool place where there's a lot of snow. So it has sense that her family is actually water, because she can actually control the water in every kind of state that you may find it. And I really, really adore it in that sense. So everything is very coordinated and it has a lot of sense. However, as I said, it's not info dumping. All the information regarding, for example, the war or the revolution that happened is given, taking into account the rhythm of the story or the tension of the story, because we cannot forget that this is also the story of a murder. So the bits and pieces that either the police or the set police of this city or the students are finding out on their own, it's connected to this kind of thriller sort of type of subplot that is linked to the background historical kind of past that is not so healed, as I said before. Everything is very well linked in that sense. Now, if we have talked about different characters or different mixed characters. We have to analyze those characters. As I said before, we are going to encounter a very I don't remember the word. A very vast group of characters, very different from one another, but they are, the majority of them are actually students, and therefore they are acting like young adults. They are new to this environment. They want to learn, but they also want to mingle. And I love how different approaches to the academic field are shown here. I love different kind of personalities that they have. For example, I love how the kind of older characters that are from the second course, for example, the second year, are kind of mothering the new ones in a way until they make like a gang to hang out, and I love that. I love how realistic they seem, even though they have this fantastical approach to them as well because of the abilities that they have. But it's kind of a big group of friends, and after a few pages, after I don't know 80 pages, you already know the characters. You more or less know how they are going to react to certain situations. I remember that I had a few times in which I was yelling at a character because now I love him, but I struggle a lot with him and his very, very risky decisions. But also there are characters that are very, very soft, and also they rely a lot on their friends, and that's something you really see throughout the whole story. They kind of have to survive in this new environment that is quite scary and risky now that there's a murder committed in the school. So this is not Harry Potter. They are not children, but they are very young yet. They are new adults. They are basically 18 upwards. So I feel like you have this kind of, in some cases you have this kind of almost teenager behavior yet, because they are not used to be adults. They are still very, very young, and they rely on the found family they have formed with this group of people. Of course, a lot of them still have connection to the war, not because they live the war, because the majority of these characters, the students, are born after the revolution or the year the revolution finished. So what they know is what they have been told or what they have studied. They have been told by the family, because maybe some relatives were involved in one way or another, or they have read it about it or seen on the kind of TV version that we have in this world. However, the war is very fresh because some set of characters were considered inferior before the revolution, and that's kind of a constant struggle that they have with those that before the revolution were considered the superior class of people, and that's something that is still very fresh even though they didn't live it. So it's quite interesting to see how politically involved all of this, or the majority of these people, even though they are very, very young, they are actually very committed to what happened. And at the beginning, this doesn't seem kind of a big thing. It seems like, okay, we're going to talk about politics now, about something we never seen before. But when this kind of background of the revolution reappears, and it's really, really fresh still there, the kind of alliance to what happened before, the thought that they normally have, even though they haven't lived it themselves, resurface or manifest itself. And I love that, because young people can be political. Actually, they need to be political, because it's the world that they live in, and if you want to prevent certain events of the story, you need to take an act, even if you need to take action, even if it's only a small part. And I love that. I love how how political they are, and also I love how they socialize with one another and how the relationship develop. Not only romantic relationship, but friendships, kind of hate to love things, or maybe just hate because there's enemies in this book, and this political background at the kind of very very back of the story is still very kind of alive. So you see these struggles in the social relationship that they're trying to form, and I love that. I love how real they seem because they, as I said before, they make mistakes, but they are very committed to certain stuff, and that's very human. I feel like they are very human. That's the word. You are probably wondering where are all these kind of colorful notes that I made here. I have a color code for this book. This is an exercise I never did before. I want to be a writer and I'm still struggling to tell my story, but in the process I decided to start studying the books I read with the eyes of a writer. So what I have decided is to create a color code for each kind of stuff. We already talked about social relationships, which are the orange kind of tabs here, and there's love as well, which is the pink ones. But what I love, one of the things I love the most about the world building that I already mentioned, is that in order to make it more believable, the authors decided to link these fantasy events, fantasy related events of historical events. They decided to link it to similar events in our history. So you have a background with this kind of emperor that was ruling over this world, and the kind of actions that he did sometimes, only sometimes, are very similar to our kind of key points in history. And I'm not going to say which kind of relation to those events have, but I love how they created their own kind of historical events for this fantasy world. But you can actually see a resemblance to real stories or real parts of history that we went through, and that's very useful, I believe, because sometimes when you manage to create a fantasy world, you want to innovate in what happens in this world, or what happened before, to recreate or to create this new world that you have set. But the problem is that if you go too fantastical about it, maybe sometimes it's quite hard to connect with this world because we never experience the events that you are telling this as part of the historical background of the world that you are creating. So if you make it slightly similar to what we have gone through as a society in the real world, if you take that historical events and kind of twist it a little bit or change the outside of it, but the kind of exterior aspect of it, but the message that you are telling with those invented historical events is very similar to ones we went through, I think it's easier to understand and to be involved in that history more than if it's just a fantastical event out of the blue. And in the end, I also, the historical events or historical references to our historical events through fantasy are the yellow ones. But my favorite so far, apart from the yellow ones, are the green ones. The green tabs symbolize or mean the craft, the writing craft. I cannot say a lot of things about the writing craft in here, but what I will say is that the way they have to describe and get you to know the abilities and how they work, it's magnificent. It's something entirely new, and I love how organic they seem, and how when you go to one class that is related to theoretical approach of this kind of control of the elements, of the families, how kind of it's very well explained. It has sense. This kind of link to the abilities that they have is very organic and real, and once it's explained theoretically, you actually sit down and say, oh, that has sense. As well, there's a lot of kind of social interactions that are explained in a very beautiful way, in a very human way, but that goes through the pages of the book and fill you with joy or with tears, and that's something part of the craft or the craft I also mark in here, for example. I think that this book should be translated into English, which is not at the moment, because I will always recommend you to read it. However, because of the vast kind of world building and information that you have here, I mainly recommend you to read it if you have a very, very advanced knowledge in Spanish, because otherwise you're going to be a little bit lost. Also because the plot is very kind of layered. That's what I explained before. You have several elements or points to consider in the plot, and it's not an easy plot to follow sometimes. So if you have an advanced level of Spanish, I believe you will be able to catch this or to enjoy this in the way I think it should. Well, I hope you enjoyed this review, because this is it. This is the end. Do you have an English kind of fantasy book that is not Harry Potter that you consider that is really, really well done in terms of weaving world building with storytelling and plot? Please let me know in the comment section down below. I hope you enjoyed this review. See you next week. Bye!